There is one side of the legacy which hopefully continues, which is about values, principles, ethics, and all that. But as far as the business is concerned, what has to continue is discontinuity or being a friend of disruption or bringing in disruption, for example. So the mindset has to be there uh, from the leadership who leave behind a legacy that their next generation, for example, they are able to adapt to disruptions. They probably even love disruptions. So creating a legacy, in my view, is something in the professional domain for executive managers is about growth management. Mark on the legacy that they leave behind, the earlier generation, is about values principles, is about how they deal with people, how they deal with employees, how they deal with the regulatory framework, how they deal with the government, for example.
Today, we thought we'll look at legacy leadership.
Wow, that's a great topic. But why did you think about this topic?
I mean, as an individual, I've always grown up looking at companies where legacy leadership has always had a significant impact.
Most of the companies which contribute almost 70 to 80% of the economy of that country, they are basically family-run businesses, or they started from family-run businesses. Then from they scaled up and get into more professional management. They went to public, etc. But family-run businesses where legacies are created by the entrepreneur who started and the next generation, etc., is where we see the best example of legacy leadership. And we also see not only through not only just the example of success, we also see where they had pitfalls, where they also go through learning curves. On the other side, we also see, for example, where the entrepreneurs have not probably been able to create this legacy, and therefore those companies had to practically shut down. And we see a lot of them even, around where we live in Bangalore, in industrial areas, a lot of companies are not growing, and because the legacies are not being created.
How do leaders balance out the short-term objective to the long-lasting impact that they can have as a leader?
That's the difference between a manager and a leader. A manager for sure has to manage the short term because that's what creates the resources for creating the long term, right? And the leader is supposed to have a vision and drive the organization, including herself or himself, towards towards the future that he or she believes in, which is basically what is painted as the vision, for example. So you draw strategy of an organization or a business from the vision that you have. So the vision is the domain of leadership. Creating the strategy for sure also is the domain of leadership, but that's where the manager comes over. It could be the same person. Okay, I come to that later. And then you get into the execution of the strategy. And the moment you do that, you are creating or wasting your short-term resources. And if you create and you are accumulating those resources, you are then able to fund your future strategies. So legacies are, for example, are not created only by the short term being achieved, right? You have to also create surpluses, not only of financial surplus, but even knowledge surpluses. And obviously, knowledge is resting in individuals, so you have to create also people surpluses or leadership surpluses so that your future is kind of invested in. And then you get into the job of, again, leadership to ensure that future. And that's how you create legacies for yourself. That's how companies then are sustainable for a longer period of time. Okay. I mean, one thought just comes to my mind when I use the word company. One of the first financial management books I probably read through, the first paragraph says the company is defined as a perennial entity. Now, the company is a perennial entity, which may be started by a human being, but the human being is not perennial, right? And so what happens after, if I've started a company or a business, what happens after I die? Or I'm, much before death, I'm becoming now not being able to create much. So I have to create the next generation, okay? And that's how you create this legacy. Because the company can remain, that's not a problem. But the company will also be folded up if there is no leadership that you create, no legacy that you create.
Great traits or behaviors of these leaders who leave an impact?
Well, that brings me to, first of all, look at two different contexts. One is the context of family businesses that I spoke about a few minutes back, and how the people who started a family business and then running it, growing it, etc., you know, um, the traits over there, then we can talk about that you require or we see, observe, which creates legacy leadership. The other context is that professionals who are working in companies as managers, executives, they also, for example, can create and should create and do create a legacy leadership. Okay, but these two contexts are different, right? One is your own company, it's your family company, you are creating it for the future, for the growth of the company, and you are also bringing in transitions maybe to your next generation in ownership and shareholding, etc., and all that. Another is as you are a professional, you're not a shareholder, okay, but to create legacy for yourself is something which the traits that you need or the motivations that you have probably be a little bit different from what we see in the family side. Let me simply just, address a question that what is the advantage of creating a legacy if you are a professional as a manager executive? One is this, that when you create the legacy, you don't create it for this point of view that, people will talk about you very warmly or with respect, and you don't really do that because of that. Okay? You do it because it fits your current objectives, which you may say short term, but I'm using deliberately the word current and not just short term. Okay, because in the business domain, short term could be KPIs and stuff like that. But it is current. I mean to say that because you as a leader, in as a professional, as an executive, you have certain role that you play. Now, while you are playing this role, you have to ask this question: how long can you stay in this role? And the answer will be, X number of months or years. But that X will be nowhere going near infinity. Okay, right? And in today's context in organizational dynamics, any person in a certain role probably that can be in that role normally not more than maybe 2 to 3 years. Okay, just to say that. Okay, in the earlier times when I was young, yes, you could be probably there for 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, but yet it's quite a finite uh, distance that you can go. Now, while you have to, when you ask this question, you also naturally, start thinking, what am I doing after this 2 or 3 years? The other thing is this, that who is going to take over? Now, if you don't create your legacy as a leadership, okay, you won't have people who can take over from you. And your management may not release you or may not really look at it very happily that you want to go somewhere else. Okay, inside the same organization. You will for sure leave and go somewhere else. But if you leave and go somewhere else, you are not leaving a good legacy, right? You're not develop a second line, for example, right? Or somebody to take over your role. So creating a legacy, in my view, is something in the professional domain for executive managers is about growth management. Okay. You help somebody to take over from you, and thereby you leave a legacy behind. I'll come to what is that legacy about in a minute, but you leave a legacy behind through that individual, right? And that makes that individual grow. And because you did that, you also are ready to take on and bite more, either inside the same organization or somewhere else. And that creates growth for yourself. So legacy leadership for sure is one kind of an answer for growth management for yourself as well as somebody from your team. Now, just let me address the kind of legacy that you leave behind. And that probably has to do also with, the values and principles, ethics, your style of leadership, what you believe in, for example, what you do not believe in, etc., which also is imbibed into your legacy leader. And this happens, doesn't have to happen deliberately. It happens because of your leadership. Because leadership is about how you behave, how you manifest. For example, people see you taking decisions. People see you, making choices. People see you behaving with your team members, your peers, your management, etc., people see you as a human being. And basically, what you manifest is your culture. And what is that culture about? It's basically your sense of your values, principles, ethics, domains, boundaries. That how you manage your personal space, for example, how you manage when you get a call from your spouse or from your child or from your parents, okay, etc. How you manage yourself. All this creates and leaves behind a legacy that may be followed by your successor or may not be. That's a different issue. But if it is followed, that's what leaves behind the legacy which people talk about. This is how when I used to work. Because one of the great things also about leadership is that we don't learn leadership by studying a book. We learn leadership by practicing our life. And one of the things uh, I can speak for myself, helped me always, that when I was in, say, at crossroads, not just a career crossroad, but even on thinking basis, on making some decisions, for example, tough decisions. By tough, does it mean? That the decision will have big consequences, right? And I'm accountable, I'm responsible for those consequences because I'm the guy who's taking the decision, right? And sometimes I would think about that leader that I respected and I still respect, how he or she would have handled such a situation. So it's like, using that stereotype, and that comes when I have the respect for that leader, right? Now, this leader could be somebody from my family, it could be my ex boss or ex manager, okay? And I was influenced. So that is how the legacy again comes in, because that person left an influence in my mind, and that makes me look at a complex scenario, okay, where I have to make choices and decisions, and I then go ahead from there. So, legacy is a manifestation of the individual leader, and if it is effective for your successor, for your next generation, then obviously you leave a fantastic legacy behind. If it is not effective, you may have still created a good legacy, but the context might have changed, and hence the legacy that you left is not anymore applicable. But in a normal manager or executive's, prime work time, which is something like 15 years or so approximately, I think the context does not change so much. We're talking in the domain of professional managers, executives, right? So in the company or a family business context is much longer normally. But in a professional manager space, when you change roles within, say, 3 years, on an average, or 4 years, whatever it is, and you go ahead to the next your role, what you leave behind is more about how you manifested yourself as a leader, and that creates a legacy. That creates a legacy, including the successor that you develop, and that also works as a growth engine because it's like creating legacy leadership creates growth for you yourself as well as for your successor.
Family business environment. Will role modeling, like you said, for professionals, will it have a hindrance because driven by one person and it goes as a legacy?
Well, yes and no, I would say. It depends on the context. Because if my father, okay, has started a business which he has then kind of, inspired me to join, and I've taken on willingly, not that I'm forced to do it, because that's a very different context, right? I mean, right? So when I've taken on willingly, and probably helped me also to kind of, move in, and that's what we see in successful family businesses, right? The next generation has been brought in, groomed, and then left behind. For example, with the legacy that the earlier generation created. Now there can be situations where if you use what you said, the denotype of your earlier generation, it may be not fitting the context. And I don't think that's about legacy so much, because legacy is more about, you getting the next platform, including what you have imbibed from your earlier generation as morals, as values, as principles, ethics, what not to do, for example. And is more important here, and probably what to do, because to do is about action and results, and action and results have to fit the context. If the context has changed between the earlier generation or the next generation in a family business scenario, for sure, you will handle your decisions and actions a little bit differently. Technology has been changing, processes, systems, a lot of change happened in a family business from one generation to another generation. But I think what remains constant and leaves more sustainable mark on the legacy that they leave behind, the earlier generation, is about values, principles, is about how they deal with people, how they deal with employees, how they deal with the regulatory framework, how they deal with the government, for example. Because there are a lot of different kinds of challenges. And those are things where the legacy, I think is more impactful, I would say, not in business strategy, decisions and actions and because business context keeps changing, right? So, uh, in family business, it is important that you create a legacy because then only your company will continue at least through your family. Otherwise, you can still create a legacy by being in professionals. A lot of successful and sustainable businesses have been created like that because there was no second line. Look at the house of Tatas. Historically, for some unknown reasons, there was never a second generation, but they always found a Tata from somewhere, for example, and it has worked, right? But Tata's also created a great legacy, which is about the cultural side, as I said, right? So if you work in a Tata company, most of them, I understand, has that culture which gives the vibes to even the employees and the management or the leadership, which are no longer from the family. They are professionals, for example. Okay, these are very large, huge companies. So it is not just this way or the another, but yes, legacy leadership needs to be created for sustainability of any organization or company.
What are the hurdles for legacy leadership?
The hurdles for an individual leader to create a legacy is not whether you have family or not, whether you have good people in your team to create as your successor or not. That's not the, I think, major hurdle. The major hurdle is coming from your own psyche. To use my old phrase, how you are wired, and we are all wired differently. For example, somebody who is too narcissist or has very high narcissistic needs, that can be a very big hurdle to leave behind a legacy. At least a legacy which is positive and which creates sustainability. And I feel as a leader that I know it all and I can do it all, then obviously I'm not creating any succession plan. I need people who will do my bidding. So so the individual part, the hurdles, one could be that person's psychological needs, which can be hurdles. The second part is this: that is that person, for example, more a perfectionist or more a visionary, or both. Now it's normally quite rare to have a visionary and a perfectionist, in the same person. So we are normally wired that we are more on the vision side or ideation side and, the dreams and the aspiration side, or we are more on the perfectionist side where we want to do a job very, very well. And that normally is about what the job you are doing, right? So, for example, if you have a great engineer who is a fantastic designer of products and using technology, having started a business and it became successful, now that person may find it quite difficult to find a successor who is as good as he or she is, and that could be a hurdle. So he has to find a solution that after him or her, you know, how does this company still keep growing? How does this business still keep growing with a person who is leading, who is not like him himself? Okay, so that can be a hurdle. So perfectionism versus the visionary side or the leadership side, for example. And for sure, there could be a few other reasons on the individual plane where you are under stress, you are under, health challenges, and that affects obviously your mental state, and you are not free to think about the future. You're not, looking eyeball to eyeball into people that you work with. Okay, and the reason is that your mind is too much occupied, and you are too much, in your mind is possessed by all those things that trouble you, whether it is about health or whether it is about your, stress and burnout that you go through, for example. And for sure, all these things may have contribution from your personal space. People who have a, let's say, if I may say, a very happy family life, probably will find it easier to look more at people, other people and look at also people who can become, their successors, and thereby they leave a legacy behind. But people who are troubled, for whatever reasons, it's not that somebody is wrong or right. I'm not sitting on judgment on anybody who may not have a relatively a happier life, but we all go through that also, right? It could be health reasons, it could be many things. It could be also completely extraneous factors. For example, there's a war or a conflict going on. I mean, we in India, we know what happened to families and individuals and their psyches because of the partition on both sides, right? Now, you can't blame the individuals, but if you go through that kind of trauma, okay, your psyche is affected. It's changed. You look at life, people, issues differently, right? You're more scared of losing anymore because you lost a lot. But most importantly, it is about, I would say again, coming back to the narcissistic needs. That can become a very big hurdle to leave behind a legacy. Your second is that if you are a perfectionist, you have to be mindful that you may not get another perfectionist, whether it's from your family and the family business or from your team. Okay. So you have to think about, how to manage the sustainability of what you want to contribute. And what you want to continue has to become the driver rather than the perfectionism. Okay. They have to find ways to handle the perfectionism. But you cannot sacrifice the sustainability part of it, right? And the third is, as I said, that there can be extraneous factors which affect you, including your health and mental health, which also can be a big hurdle for anybody to leave behind a legacy.
With your take on when who feels they lack the resources or a platform can leave an impact on the legacy behind.
Point is this, that uh, when somebody feels the lack of a platform to leave a legacy behind, you don't first of all leave a legacy behind. I think it's I said at the beginning, because you decided or you want to leave a legacy. You anyway leave a legacy. We are talking about the sustainability of that legacy. We are talking about whether it's a positive legacy or not, which can ensure growth for the future. Okay, not just sustainable, because nothing is sustainable at the same plate. Either you grow or you perish, as far as companies or businesses are concerned. So therefore, if somebody lacks that belief, then first of all, that belief has to be brought in. Okay. But then if I lack belief in the future of my team, organization, company, family, business, whatever it is, and what is the legacy I can leave behind? I leave behind a legacy of lack of competence, lack of belief, and obviously it's a dying legacy, okay, or it's a dead legacy, because nothing can go out of lack of confidence and lack of belief, lack of vision, lack of dreams, lack of aspirations, etc. Right? So legacy comes from people who are believing in growth, who are believing in doing something themselves, and they are leading primarily. Okay, so that's why probably you have this phrase legacy leadership. So without leadership, you can't have legacy, right? And leadership is basically is a phenomenon which you see where you lead towards something, and what do you lead towards? It's more growth, it's more future, it's more progress, right?
How the values and principles impact on creating a leader's legacy?
My values or principles, or a manager's or an executive values or principles, are something that makes that leader kind of, skirt certain boundaries or breach certain boundaries. Okay. Either I will shy away from something, whether my values and principles, or I will jump out of something because my values and principles are not in a very nice zone. So I feel myself stifled, or I feel that I'm constrained. I cannot practice, and I cannot be my natural self, etc. So I want to jump out of, okay, to where I can still be acted with my values and principles. What are values and principles? People do not always find it very easy to articulate. But you ask, in this context, would you do this? And that's where the values and principles come in at the back of the mind, after the resources part of it, etc., that whether he will actually do it willingly or not, for example. And in another context, where the person you see shying away or shirking, that it could be not because of the competence, because of the resources that he has or not, but she's shirking away because her values and principles are saying, no, 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 you should not get it. You should not do that. Right. So, values and principles drive our, decisions and actions and overall manifestations as a leader. And that's for which we have to
Looking from the perspective of the family business, and
yeah. So you have, well, that's a different context. I think I spoke about the individual, the hurdles that they face, as you asked about creating a legacy. So in family, you have probably quite a few of those issues, those individuals anyway coming in, whether it is narcissism, whether it is, you know, perfectionism and all that. Now, uh, normally families obviously would like to keep the management of the enterprise in the hands of the family. Now, this is related if you look at it from today's context, and you look at it that what kind of knowledge a business needs to be run. In trading business, okay, it's easier to keep it within the family because you are not having to bring in too much of knowledge or develop knowledge. You are dealing with distribution networks, both on the entire supply chain side of sections. Yeah. But nowadays it's not that easy for sure because there are sort of technology laws which has come into the logistics and distribution and warehousing and all that. So even families will find it difficult to find the knowledge or develop the knowledge inside their own family. Okay. So, and then in manufacturing business for sure, to grow and to keep your company growing, you need to constantly, you know, upgrade your technology. Right? You need to constantly, like any company, whether it's run by a family or not, doesn't matter. A company has to be in the game of, constantly creating competitive advantage, to use a buzzword, right? So the hurdles that are faced in a family business, especially, for example, is this that they have to find people either within the family or as professionals who will continue to develop the company and the business. Now, the legacy that the founder, let us say, or the generation in running the company, say today, um, leaves behind has to help in finding that, help in finding people who can not only carry today's knowledge but also keep on developing that knowledge. And that is where the I won't call it a conflict, but basically kind of different forces come in, which is the shareholding versus management. Now, in family business, the shareholding can still remain with the family, and by doing that, uh, you don't have to restrict that only the family members will hold the knowledge of the business. Right. So typical, for example, Marwari owned businesses in the past. There are fantastic examples of companies which grew like a Billas, but and still run by the family, you see. But they also learned that they have to bring in professionals because professionals bring in the knowledge and they keep on, that then developing that knowledge in whichever domain you need, from production to supply chain to R&D to marketing. But if you are constrained with the fact that you want to keep everything within the family, you cannot grow beyond a typical old-fashioned trading business. Okay. So therefore, the legacy that you leave behind is about the dream or the aspiration of the founder, whether he or she wants this company to keep on growing. And there are several ways you can keep the company growing. You can still bring in your family also if they want to, for example. But that's where the hurdles come. If the founder's business and the business model and the marketplace and the technology is something that the next generation does not like. I mean, we know, for example, in Bangalore, we are several industrial areas, and you see almost 70% of the companies that their next generation is not interested to run that business. Why? Because they're still running the same old business, supplying to the same old OEM. There's hardly any competitive advantage, working very thin margins, okay, with some workers, workmen, and some typical old technology machines. So the next generation were not only just well educated, they also are exposed to the new world. They want to do something different. So that's a hurdle, okay, in family business, very clearly. And that's one of the reasons that you see a lot of family, the founders' businesses just closing down. The other part of it is that, of course, we hear about the squabbles that can happen, which is more on the profit sharing or the shareholding side of it. But and there too, the values and the principles of the founder and how the founder has run his family. And normally these are men, so I'm using the word his only. So either going to be a hurdle for leaving behind a good legacy, or it can be a great catalyst to leave behind a great legacy, for example. Therefore, legacy leadership depends on the founder and the way the founder has manifested his leadership, including values, principles, ethics, handling different stakeholders, handling his family, for example. And that's all watched by people who are left behind, including the successor that he has probably created or helped create. So a lot depends on the founder. A lot depends on how he has managed the family, how he has brought in knowledge, how he has brought in even employees, for example, as professionals or not. So that's what I would say as far as the individual, whether the professional individual or the founder individual is concerned, to leave behind a good legacy.
How about the social, impact?
That's very critical. That's very critical because the moment we look at the society around the leadership, then we are also talking about the changing times, right? And in today's times, obviously, you have a lot of aspirations that is constantly molding the way leaders are thinking and acting, and the society does impact the kind of legacy that is left behind by leaders. Now, the most important thing that comes to my mind is that the leaders may leave behind the legacy, because of obviously the way they manifested themselves, but because of the fast changing times, the legacy may not be in tune with the social aspirations. And therefore, the new leaders who have to handle the legacy, for example, they may not be able to just run continuity. They have to themselves be adaptable to change, and also obviously in the game of leaving a legacy when they are not there. So the society and the aspirations that basically boils up because of the way society has been changing and the different pulls and pressures uh, coming from the times that we live in has a deep impact on legacy leadership for sure.
On the social impact side of things, where women, we coming from a patriarchal society,
Yeah.
the impact on women carrying forward the legacy, will it have a significant impact?
No, it does, obviously, because, I mean, gone are the days when the women were only managing the back end of the society or the family. Okay, today you have women as well qualified, as well educated, as well trained, skilled, whatever, as a man. Gender has nothing to do with the competence or the explicit knowledge of the leader being a woman as opposed to a man. But a woman being the woman for sure is not a father, is not a brother, is not a son. And one side is the patriarchal society and its impact. So because the woman would still, once they, start becoming part of a family or decide to get married, they still go into and live with the man's family, for example. Of course, nowadays, not many people live with family like parents and grandparents as in the old days, but yet the identity of the woman is linked to the man, right? Yes, we do see, therefore, you see that women today sometimes carry their maiden names. But see, all these issues, whether they are how troublesome it is for the woman as a leader, is one side of the chapter. But one needs to also understand that these things the men don't have to go through. Okay. And then when you're talking about legacy, you're also looking at continuity, right? Now, there is one break in continuity when the woman starts her life with a man, because in a patriarchal society, she is now kind of going into the man's family. Okay. And even if they are living as a couple and starting their own family, and the man and the woman are, let's say, both equally um, in sync with the reality that needs to be managed, by which I mean that the man and the woman respect themselves as individuals, as professionals, and as partners. That's the best that you can have, which is not so easy because the men will still carry the baggage of the patriarchal society from the relationship point of view and the relationships that they have to manage on both sides of the family. Uh, but then the woman also, when she gets into the family way, for example, there's another disruption which men don't have to go through. So when we think about legacy leadership, a woman leader has to go through at least these two disruptions. One is driven by the society that we are in, patriarchal society, and another is the biological side of it. And that's why probably you see that women in leadership positions, they probably postpone, these disruptions, because it does then obviously um, disrupt the legacy that they are knowingly or unknowingly creating. Okay, this disrupts uh, their life. I would not say just careers, right? Because if the career is on a pause for a couple of, if not years, 16 months or 12 months or whatever it does change and have a very permanent impact on the legacy that they had created till then, and they can't simply just, uh, restarted from where they left, because the context around in their workplace and in their career zones have changed in those 12 months or 18 months that they're out. But there's the third side to it, which is what a woman brings, in which men, as men, we don't, because they're women, they're mothers, they're sisters, and daughters. And they bring in an approach which is different, that is more from biologically being different individuals. So that difference does bring in a kind of different impact on the legacy that they leave behind. Just imagine that, there's been a woman leader, like we had quite a few outstanding, illustrious woman leaders in the banking sector, in the tech sector, etc. And you just go to this organization and ask, what do they see as what so and so left behind? And you will hear, even if the legacy left behind by a man and the woman is good, but you will see the content part of that legacy is a little bit different, because just because is the imprint is being left by a different kind of a human being, which is a woman or and a man, for example. So woman being in the, let's say, in the orchestration of legacy leadership is little bit different, because men are not women and women are not men in different ways.
How will business get impacted from the hurdles of legacy to this?
I will touch upon maybe at least two prime aspects of any business. One is the financial side, and another is the technology side. Now, the legacy leadership, for example, what they leave behind is obviously going to react to the requirements on the financial side as well as the technology side. Now, if the legacy that you leave behind is not with the habits of, for example, adaptability change to rapid changes in technology, then that could be a hurdle, for example, for the legacy to be continued. Okay, on a positive note. The other side is the financial side, because the legacy that you leave behind is not open. The legacy leadership that you to create and leave behind is not open to, for example, expanding the balance sheet, okay, which would mean that, you dilute your shareholding if it is in a family business, which could mean that you go into turning a private company into a public company. That means you bring in public shareholding, okay. So if you have not created the kind of a pathway of habits, of discussions, of, mindsets for expansion, where you need to adapt and bring in new technologies on a very rapid pace, you don't have the leadership that you have left behind, it will not work. Sustainability will not happen. And without sustainability, there is no use of, discussing legacy leadership, right? So you're not talking about, things remaining static about from the legacy that you are left behind. You are still going to talk about how to grow this company, how to grow this business. And so both finance and the technology side, and also there's a little bit more operational level, but here it comes to my mind is the organizational structure that you leave behind. Do you leave behind the structure and the leaders of this, different parts of the organizational structure who have seen so much of continuity that they are not anymore in the habits to adapt to change. So it depends again on the leadership who is passing the baton to the next generation and they're leaving a legacy. That are they consciously driving that kind of leaders to develop who can adapt to things that they have not had to go through. So this is what is about creating, this is about succession management, succession planning, and also grooming your successors with this thought in mind that yes, there is one side of the legacy which hopefully continues, which is about values, principles, ethics, and all that. But as far as the business is concerned, what has to continue is discontinuity or being a friend of disruption or bringing in disruption, for example. So the mindset has to be there uh, from the leadership who leave behind a legacy that their next generation, for example, they are able to adapt to disruptions. They probably even love disruptions. And you can see that most companies who have grown in the last particularly 10, 20 years, you have seen that there's been a good succession development and there's been a lot of change that the successors have managed. And somewhere we have seen that, somebody has been brought in as a successor, but within a very short time, the former leadership who probably now are in board positions or in supervisory positions on a governance level only, they realize, and that's actually where the board comes in. The board plays a tremendous role in not just managing the legacy, but also getting the returns out of the legacy, including the leadership that is part of the legacy that you leave behind. Okay. And you will like somebody so much that because he or she was one of your proteges that you developed. But if you see from a board position, from a supervisory position, that the context has changed so much that your protege doesn't fit it, then you need to change that protege, right? And so business is more dynamic than the human side of it, which is the values and principles and ethics we talked about. But I would say the most significant part of even business is that it is run by human beings, definitely not by AI. Okay, so it will be still run. The decisions that we made by human beings, the complexities have to be waded through, and the new directions have to be found. New technologies have to be adapted, developed. For example, competencies have to be changed. Okay, so all this change management is the responsibility of the leadership and the legacy that you leave behind. If it's not able to handle all that, the so-called perennial entity as a company you started or you ran, even as a professional manager, is not going to remain perennial.
The legacy leaders evolve over the generations, over the future, considering the millennials and the Gen Z.
Oh my God. Okay. Okay. That is something for me also is quite. I've not myself had to practice. I didn't have to manage so-called Gen Zs of today. For sure, I had to still manage the people who are by age group considered as Gen Zs. Naturally, they were probably Gen Zs every 10 years or 20 years back, but they were not labeled like that. And these are labels I'm conscious coming from the US more. But I also see that it is pertinent today in our society, in our industry, in the industry that we are in India, because uh, most of the people that we meet, and Gen Z particularly, they work in global companies, GCCs and global subsidiaries, etc., and all that. For me, is important, absolutely, is, again, looking at it from the lens of today's topic, legacy leadership. That see the people who are today millennials or Gen Zs, they will be, you know, day after tomorrow's baby boomers, because time does not stop anyway. So in another, over the next 10, 20 years, the Gen Zs of today will be the millennials of day after tomorrow, of the future. And the millennials of today will be the baby boomers of the future. So what kind of legacy the millennial managers or baby boomers, if any, are left still in organizations, are leaving behind, that the Gen Zs of today and the millennials are able to embrace and still continue growth, okay? Whether it's a family business or as professional managers or executives over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think that's a very important topic. But all that happens today to the leadership, which day after tomorrow will maybe looked at as the legacy leadership, that means they left behind a legacy, is the responsibility of the today's leaders. So whether they are millennials or Gen Zs, day after tomorrow, or you baby boomer, that's just labels. So today's leaders are going to leave behind a legacy. So are they conscious? Are today's managers, whatever be the labels, are they conscious that they are leaving behind a legacy? And there, I don't get a very confident feeling about it, because, why burnout? Why stress? Why do we have this challenge that, we have lost sight of the pause button, or forget to reflect? Because if you don't pause, you can't reflect anyway. So with all the challenges that by we, I mean the leadership today who they are facing, I think the legacy, the risk of the kind of legacy, that may be left behind, the risk in that is that it may be a legacy which is embedded with short-termism. Okay, and I'm saying this more to rather provoke or instigate today's leaders to think that, you know you have a beautiful moment in your life, or time in your life, and day after tomorrow you'll be looked upon as the guys who are leaving behind a legacy. Now, if you look beyond the short term, if you look beyond just the KPIs of tomorrow and this year, then probably you remembered more as having left a good legacy. And what's a good legacy for the future? A good legacy for the future is which leaves behind habits of thinking, values, principles, technology, of course, and financial muscle, for example, which continuously fuels growth. Okay, so that's a good legacy. So that it's not that you expect the people of tomorrow, the leaders of tomorrow, to follow what you are doing. No, but the point is, do you enable them with with that kind of thinking, or that kind of legacy in both the business side, I mean, and the psychological or individual side, the business side, I mean, the financial muscle that you leave. Do you leave healthy balance sheets? Do you leave, you know, profitable technologies, for example, or sustainable technologies? Do you leave behind values, principles, and ethics which will continue to keep the companies in a sustainable manner? Okay. So all that is what leaders leave behind, whether they do it knowingly or unknowingly. Everybody leaves behind a legacy. We're talking about a good legacy. And what's a good legacy is what still creates avenues for growth for the people and the society that comes tomorrow, right? So I think these labels are very pertinent today, for sure. But then, yeah, today's Gen Zs will be day after tomorrow's baby boomers, and they will look behind. And I would like to believe that they also would like to look behind and say, okay, we did a good job. We left behind good impact on the organizations that we worked in, people that we worked with, and also the society that we lived in, for example. So I mean, unless, legacy leadership is not something that can be taught. I think that is something which comes from uh, true leadership, which believes in doing something good, doing something right. They may be proven wrong in some bits and pieces here and there. That's okay. But do you leave behind a legacy which people who are then enjoying the legacy or using the legacy are able to use for growth further? And growth is always about the future, and this future is always about relative unknowns, uncertainties, ambiguities. So, what kind of people are you leaving behind? And what kind of culture are you leaving behind? What kind of values, principles you are leaving behind? Um, that will pave the way for tomorrow's growth and happiness.
I mean, in your experience being a leader yourself, who was that person and what is that as a impact which had upon you, which you took for the legacy leadership?
Oh, I could speak about many, honestly speaking. I mean, definitely starting with my father, who was the first, who was my main inspiration, probably at least, and was enough for me till probably I turned 40. But then I was in a slower changing world. And even my mother after that, because, when I became a managing director, I drew inspiration from the way she led her life because she was managing so many relationships. And as opposed to be a functional leader, when you become a general manager with a small G, you realize that you have to manage so many different relationships. Okay. And then coming to a few managers, my leaders that I worked with, or even my sometimes people who worked in my team, uh, I can never forget quite a few of them, honestly. Um, One or two are no more in this world, sadly, but they've always been, beacons of not just inspiration, but even sometimes I've asked myself, I mean, if he or she would have been in my place in the situation I am in, how would have he or she reacted or approached it? And sometimes that gave me an answer. Of course, that person is not sitting next to me and I'm not asking. So the legacies that, you know, my former leaders left behind, I would say in short, is what framed me and made me what I am today. I mean, even I don't want to sound frivolous at all. And you know me, I'm quite serious about even fun. Uh, even the time I spent with you, for example, you influenced me, right? Your life and the way you run your life, even if you are whatever this label is, for example, you are a millennial, right, Vinay? So, and that influences me. Whatever I'm doing since we are working together and spending time together is impacted by the legacy that your behavior, your leadership leaves and as an imprint on me. So I think legacy leadership is not just an organizational thing. It's it's a thing about a life. And that's probably why, I agreed to change my current label from an executive coach to a life coach because leadership is about life. It's not just about what you execute or you are paid for in a certain role in a certain company. Um, Surely not.
Today we listened to Amit on legacy leadership. We understood the hurdles with individuals will have, the family situation will have, the society and the business scenarios will have. And also we realized that legacy is not something which happens over a day or night. Thank you. Thank you.
And I would also request our viewers, Vinay, that please put some questions that you would like us to address going further. Because every time you put a comment or a question, you actually leave behind a legacy on us because we have to manage it. And that gives us a chance to lead our way, probably in a more valuable manner. Definitely for us and maybe for other viewers too. So thank you for subscribing to our channel and see you next time in the next episode.